Today is a day dedicated to all the men who strive to put their families first. Children with presents give their fathers gifts, and if they have fathers who are present in their lives, they're more likely to be successful in school and just generally in life, and also have better mental health. That's according to the National Library of Medicine. So on this Father's Day, East Texas News Weekend's Andrew Culver spoke with the church congregation about the importance of being a dad.
God gave us kids. It's our job to make sure that they're led the right way and, to prioritize that over work and all other things.
New Beginnings Baptist Church in Longview reflected on the men who lead by example. Executive Pastor Derrick Jackson spoke on his father's death 3 years ago. He reminded the church that fathers have an essential role in a family dynamic.
One of the things that men want more than anything, more than affirmation, is respect. Maybe it's not your biological father, maybe it's somebody that stepped into your life.
Jackson says one of the most important qualities in a father is being intentional.
If they're not, dreams go by the wayside, life lessons go by the wayside. When you have intentionality with your kids, it really changes things.
It has always been my goal as a father to point my sons toward their Heavenly Father. And I really think being faithful to your wife is one of the best things that a father can do for his sons or his daughters, and to provide that stability in the home.
It's the moments of gentle, I don't want to say gentle parenting, but where he gets on their level and he tries to understand what it is that they need most.
About 61% of men aged 15 and over are fathers, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. In a day dedicated to men with families, dads express what they're ultimately grateful for.
Feeling appreciated from my kids and my wife, it definitely helps me to want to grow and to want to be a better person.
Andrew Culver, East Texas News Weekend.
A poll conducted by Talker Research shows that most people consider their dads one of their greatest mentors.